We move now to a panel on a topic that could not be more relevant and, to my geeky mind, more interesting. We're about to discuss AI in banking. Before we welcome our panel to the stage, I've been asked to share a couple of observations myself because, as well as hosting events like this for a living, I also give the occasional keynote on the GPT revolution and the incredible last couple of years that ChatGPT and other large language models have ushered in, making all sorts of promises as to how they can revolutionise work and the economy. We've touched on a little bit of that already yesterday. I always caution when talking about these things, in a world of promises that you're seeing at the moment, where every product and service is attaching .ai to its name, you can use a degree of justifiable cynicism in evaluating the claims. I always give the example, if you're online and you see a video of a robot doing a backflip, that's amazing. And the robot probably did the backflip. The robot may have attempted 2,000 backflips and only landed one of them. And if there'd been as much as a postage stamp on the ground, the robot might not have been able to stick the landing. You have to, in this age of so much hype around these products, have a degree of that sort of cynicism in your evaluation. A powerful visual example of this is in the world of graphics and AI-generated images. The best of the best is incredible, but there are still significant gaps in what they can do. And I thought I'd show you my favourite example of that to sort of set the tone of the promise versus the reality. Anyone here who follows the NBA basketball, for example, would know recently you had this epic series between the Thunder and the Pacers. It went right down to the last game. But there was a little bit of history made in this series that some people don't know about. You know how big the Americans are around advertisements in their major sporting events? Like your Super Bowl ad campaigns can cost in the tens of millions of dollars. Well, in the recent NBA finals, there was an ad that ran, and this is the first entirely AI-created ad to screen at a major American sporting event. Okay? It's for a product called Kalshi, which allows you to frame betting markets on pretty much anything. In a couple of seconds, I'm going to roll the ad. Every person, everything, every image on this is entirely fake and AI generated. This ran in the recent NBA finals.
Indiana gonna win, baby. We're in Florida asking people what they put their money on. I'm all in on OKC. Indiana got that dog in them.
None of these are people.
Go up this month? I think we'll hit $20.
None of this is real.
How many hurricanes do you think we'll have this year? Kalshi lets you legally trade on anything, anywhere in the U.S. OKC! OKC!
Now, where did this come from? It was created by a guy called PJ Asaturo in his lab there. And when the stats came out, it turned out that PJ made this ad for an estimated cost. It took 2 days, cost $2,000 to make. And he said the best part of the entire shoot was he got to remain in his underwear for the entire time that he made it. Compared to these sort of Super Bowl ads, that's absolutely transformative, okay? But there are limits on what these things can do. When you watch ads like that, you tend to find, when you watch any video content online, you'll notice it's short, sharp clips joined together, rapid pace, because these systems aren't very good yet at holding the subtlety of a human face for any extended period of time. So while on the one hand you see that incredible thing, you see big gaps when you try and track human faces, for example. So this is an app, advanced, thanks mate. We get excited about this sort of stuff and go, wow. Tyler Perry sees that sort of stuff and immediately cancels an $800 million studio expansion in the US for fear of imminent job losses in the sector. But they're not perfect yet, okay? This is an application called, thank you very much. This is an application called Luma where you can take a still photo, upload it, and it turns it into a rolling video, okay? So this is a real photo of me and my 2 daughters after a show I did last year. Olivia sitting in front, Ellie sitting behind, me with my hand on Ellie's shoulder. We're going to roll this into a video loop, and I want you to watch what happens as we roll this loop, okay? Start by watching Olivia, who remains looking pretty much like Liv in the front there. Ellie in the background, okay, that's always going to happen. Okay, Ellie, trust me, loses her glasses and ends up looking like someone completely different. I stop looking human at about the 2-second mark, mainly because my left hand stays on Ellie's shoulder, even though she clearly steps away from me, okay? Apologies for the quality of the feed there. Okay? Let's go to the next one. If you thought that was weird, strap yourself in for the ride. Anyone recognise the guy on the left there? Yeah, Brian Cox, okay, UK astronomer, very yummy piece of crumpet on the BBC, does these big worldwide science tours where he talks about the universe. The first couple of times Brian came to Australia, I hosted these events with him. So this is us in Canberra a few years ago at an after party, VIP drinks thing, meet and greet with the fans. Let's see how the party played out, okay? As far as parties go, it was quite the party, okay? I'll get you to start by looking at Brian. Now, Brian, in this 5-second role, Brian goes from a hunky astronomer to someone who's taken 16 ecstasies, right? Now, watch me. I start with a glass of wine in my right hand. I finish with a glass of wine in my left hand, even though that starts as someone else's hand. And the fact that I'm holding a glass of wine in my right hand and my left hand doesn't stop me reaching out and patting Brian on the back with a convenient third arm that just appears when I need it. Okay, so they're not perfect yet. There are still some real gaps. I think within 12 months you'll have covered that. And video, and I think of all the different areas where this thing's making an impression, media, video, marketing, branding, advertising, the US writer strike, etc., where some of the sharpest discussions are happening. Our panel now is going to drill down into AI and its implications to banking. We have a last-minute apology from Ian Pollari from Accenture, who couldn't make it here. He's going to be replaced on the panel. But to introduce them all and to steer the discussion for us, a partner from Ashurst, please a big round of applause for Sonia Haque-Vatcher. Sonia, the stage and the panel is all yours.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us. As you can imagine, AI in banking, pretty broad topic for us to cover, and AI I know has been covered over the last day or so. What started as something that was more kind of in the realms of science fiction is very much now embedded in everything that we do to a certain extent, and very much has been embedded in the banking industry. So Adam said, I'm Sonia Haque-Vatcher. I'm a partner in Ashurst Risk Advisory Practice. I lead data analytics and AI there. Prior to joining Ashurst, I was actually at CBA, where again I led a global team of data analysts, data professionals, and data science individuals, where we led basically and led a number of AI solutions across a number of different areas, and I'm very proud to say that we were part of developing the first fraud detection AI model for the bank. So it gives me great pleasure to introduce Stuart Munro from CBA as well, Group Executive for Strategy. CBA have been well known for being very fast-forward leaders in this space, in this area, so very much looking forward to your insights overall. Thrilled also to have here Jamie Simon from AWS. So Jamie will bring a perspective around the future of AI-powered banking overall, and certainly from an infrastructure and cloud perspective. So very much looking forward to your piece. And Alistair, we'll give you a bit of a pass today, because I appreciate that you've probably only had a few bits of notice this morning, standing in for Ian. But Alistair joins us from Accenture as the Financial Services Managing Director. So thank you all and welcome for joining us. So what I wanted to do to start the conversation and warm us all up this morning is just to start with a simple question in one sentence, and I promise I'll give you more time to talk about more as we go on. But just in terms of your overall perspective, what excites you most about AI in banking today, potentially, or even concerns you? But I'll start with you, Stuart.
I think the potential to sort of breakthroughs, not just in banking, but in life sciences, scientific research broadly, precision manufacturing, robotics. I think it's an exciting future, and we need to, of course, we also need to manage the risks well, but I think there's lots that can be unlocked.
Jamie?
Yeah, I think there's been a lot of talk around the productivity opportunity that comes out of AI, and particularly given where we're at as a nation right now. I think there's a huge opportunity there. But for me, the biggest, most exciting potential here is customer experience transformation. You know, to be able to kind of fulfill that promise of being able to bring a full contextual aware interaction with the customer, driving, you know, really good advice and really good next step actions that deliver, you know, step change improvements in the way the customers experience our products and our services, and hopefully deliver better outcomes.
Thank you. So I think from my perspective, what really excites me most is that we're really starting to see the green shoots of genuine transformation now. And like you say, having started with focusing on internal productivity, building on all those proof points, the way we can now drive customer interactions, customer service and growth, and really tackle many of the really meaty challenges that in banking we've struggled with over the years, from operations through to technology and, as I say, customer service. I think that's the really exciting sort of where we stand today.
Brilliant. And so the past 2 years have been very much dominated by generative AI. And so we've seen, obviously, technologies such as ChatGPT and what they can offer, again, Stuart, to your point, not just in banking, but across the range overall. Now the conversation is shifting towards agentic AI. And so systems that can absolutely make decisions autonomously and without human direction and intervention. Stuart, interestingly, last week, actually, I had the privilege, and I kind of humble brag in terms of my courageousness in trying a Waymo in San Francisco. So very much agentic AI in a fully automated driverless car. Very interesting experience, and would highly recommend it to anyone who has the opportunity. But just in your mind, Stuart, from your perspective, what genuinely distinguishes agentic AI from generative AI, and why might this shift represent something quite fundamentally new for banking?
Thanks. Look, I think you framed it well in the question in terms of moving from just generating content to acting autonomously. And so, if generative AI is reactive in that it's responding to a prompt, agentic AI is much more proactive in terms of trying to pursue a goal, and that might mean breaking that goal into sub-goals, using tools, making decisions, and then monitoring the output and sort of iterating towards that objective. And so maybe one way of thinking about it would be, if generative AI is sort of a tool that I can use, the promise at least of agentic AI would be more like a team member that I can collaborate with or delegate to.
Yeah. And Jamie, in us seeing this shift and this change, what would your view be, and how significant do you think this step change is at the moment and likely to be? And what should organisations be doing differently to manage these capabilities responsibly? We heard the all-important word risk from Stuart earlier. So what steps should we be thinking about now?
So I think we're a long way off having fully autonomous agentic systems that don't have any human supervision whatsoever. I think there's a little bit of fear-mongering around that. We don't see anybody sort of pursuing that kind of endeavour, particularly in this industry. But we are seeing a fundamental shift in the role that humans play. And I think that the primary shift we're seeing is moving from that concept of an automated AI system, or even an autonomous acting agent handing off to a human in the loop, to having more of these autonomous execution of agents, often between agent to agent, with humans sitting on the loop, sort of supervising and managing that full end-to-end system. And that is a fundamental shift in the way that we work. And I think we think forward about the sort of the shift in the workforce. I just got back from Seattle last week, and the predominant kind of conversation going on there is future of work is going to look like all of us existing with a set of agents, that our job is not so much to do the work, but to supervise those agents in the execution of work. And so if you think about what you need to have in place to support that, and I think this is also a shift we're seeing right now, is a pivot from a focus on AI use cases to building out enterprise capability for agentic systems. That means you need to have kind of that full framework or operating system in place, where you've got really good guardrails in place to manage the execution of these agents. You've got really good observability of that system in real time, so you can take action when things aren't working. A great example is a chatbot that has autonomous execution in interacting with customers, but you've got transcription of that interaction going on with real-time analysis of that sentiment, and you've got the ability to off-ramp very quickly if that conversation is not going in the right direction, or the sentiment analysis is telling the customer is getting frustrated and not in that sort of AI loop. So it's that kind of observability and on-the-loop type human supervision that has and is quickly transitioning the role that humans have to play in these AI systems.
And you touched upon talent there as well. And so as organisations move towards, obviously, AI being embedded, whether it's generative AI or agentic, have you seen a change or shift in how people are approaching recruiting, training, upskilling, as an example?
Definitely, definitely. I mean, this skills is a critical part of enabling this future at an enterprise and a national level, and I don't think we're there yet. I think we've got a long way to go as a nation in recognising the importance of kind of capabilities and skills that the workforce of the future is going to need. We don't see it yet in our education systems, really at scale. We're doing a lot as an organisation. We've trained over 400,000 people in the last couple of years around AI. We've launched AI Spring and a bunch of other. We're doing a lot with organisations like CBA and other enterprises to help uplift the capabilities of the workforce. And it's not the traditional skills. So it's not the coding developer skills, which was what we were all scrambling to find 5 years ago, because these tools are taking over a lot of that capability. It's more about understanding the architecture of these systems and the way that you need to design for and have these real-time kind of sort of inspection observations to be able to consistently be doing system improvement. And that is a totally different skill set to the ones that we've had in the past. There's some concepts from the past that we need to bring into it, but it's all, a lot of it is going to be very new for many of us.
And Stuart, a number of organisations and clients that I've worked with have actually expressed sentiment coming from their workforce concern about what AI may mean for them in the future and their roles. Have you got any of that at CBA, or has it largely been seen as a positive?
I think largely seen as a positive, but there's, maybe just to pick up on a word that John Lonsdale used this morning, there's definitely sort of uncertainty in terms of how all this plays out. Certainly I think there's, if you think of a role as sort of a combination of tasks that I perform and skills that I need, a little bit to Jamie's point, there's going to be a range of new skills that we all need to develop very quickly, and sort of continue to develop and build. I think it's important. It's hard to believe that, we're not there yet, but the trajectory and the trend seems fairly clear. And it would be, again, of course we need to manage the risk well and do all of this safely, but it would be a real problem if Australia got left behind as a country, or a company got left behind, or even as an individual. And so, certainly I think people understand that, in a similar way to, if I'm a knowledge worker who doesn't use the internet as part of my day job, I find it very difficult in the workforce today. I think making use of some of those tools is going to be critical for all of us.
Yep. I would just jump in on that, Sonia, because I think there's it's a call to action for all of us. One of the things that is the most sort of common thing that we're seeing for organisations that are most advanced in their adoption of AI, it's business leadership really investing in understanding, not handing it off to technology as a tech project. We see that happen quite a bit, but if there's one common trait that we see in every organisation that's actually seeing value and getting success, it's the business owners have genuinely invested in understanding the capabilities of technology and are using it. CBA is a great example, like the depth that Stuart goes into and his boss to actually understand this capability, use it in the day-to-day life. Matt made a really interesting comment at the AWS Summit a little while ago. He said anything that a leader is interested in, their team is fascinated by. And I think that's a very true statement. We're seeing that as a consistent thread across the businesses that are having real success.
It's exactly right. And that doesn't just sit at exactly business leaders, but the board as well. And so Gartner made reference to by 2029, boards will be using AI to almost challenge management decisions. So really, really interesting to see how that may kind of play out down the track. Alistair, AI has quickly become a focus of global strategic competition, and we can see that in the need to invest in leadership, understanding what AI can do and be part of, to have it embedded as part of a strategic enabler for the organisation. And countries are racing to boost their AI industries. We can see that across the globe very much so. How do you think the global landscape is influencing AI's pace overall, and how do you feel Australia is positioned in that as part of that sort of global movement?
Yeah, sure. So I think that, firstly, from the work that we're doing and that we're observing here in Australia, I think there's no doubt that Australian banks there are clear proof points of really driving innovation in the way they're consuming and using these AI capabilities being developed globally. So make no mistake, there are proof points, use cases in production and scale where Australia banking is leading the way. Having said that, a lot of the real scaled investment in the core underlying infrastructure, models, etc., naturally is not here in Australia. But I think the consumption pattern that we see here in Australia is going to be a spectrum from increasingly products like the Amazon suite, where generative and agentic AI will be embedded into your tooling, and it's how you use those out-of-the-box capabilities, out-of-the-box tools. Moving down to consumption of models, so commercial and open source models, and again, how you use it and tailor it to your need. And I don't really see the other end of the spectrum. There's not going to be so much in Australia investment in building brand new foundation models. So if we focus on the two I highlighted on, the competitive advantages and differentiation comes then is on how you use your data and your talent, whether it's consuming an out-of-the-box tool or consuming a model to create your own bespoke solutions. And so I think that when we look at the Australian banking landscape, while we've got those proof points, we perhaps aren't necessarily seeing the scaled value realization of the likes like JP Morgan up there globally. But there's no doubt that that's coming. And I think as I said, referring back, what excited me at the start is that as we shift away from learning on the proof points we've got from productivity use cases to really differentiating customer engagement and growth use cases, that's where I think the potential for Australia is huge.
Genevieve Bell, you often would refer to AI as not just a singular, it's a plural. So whilst we use it as a singular, but it's a whole ecosystem made up of so many different aspects, not only the technology, the people, the governance, the data that feeds it. Jamie, where do you feel like in terms of these enablers, what those kind of really critical pieces are? And again, from an organizational perspective, how much we're investing in that critical infrastructure to really be able to enable AI? Yeah,
I love the law of threes, so I kind of like to bucket things into sort of three categories. When I think about the enablers of AI, I think about sort of the underlying foundations or the scaffolding. We've got the sort of the investment in infrastructure. Have we modernised our application suite? Have we created good governance and control of our data asset to be able to plug that into these tools to differentiate our use of those LLMs in the agentic systems? That being the first piece that's critical. And I think we've got a pretty solid tick on that. I think as a nation we've got sufficient infrastructure. AWS has announced $20 billion investment over the next 4 years to continue to build out that infrastructure. We've got good data centre operations. We talked yesterday a little bit about the energy transition, but broadly speaking, we've got really good access to high quality energy, and we've got progress on renewables. So I think that foundations piece is pretty good. I think the second piece around the skills, and I think we've got some work to do there. I mentioned before, I don't think our education institutions have progressed quickly enough. I did an exec MBA only 7-8 years ago. Sure, it was before the AI boom, but even then, it was at a prominent business school in Australia, and there wasn't one subject on technology across this exec MBA program. And I think that's a gap for us. I think we've got to shift our focus in our education institutions to be more around this digital future that we're building. So I think the skills thing needs work. I think that's definitely an area that we're probably in low amber on. And then the third category I think is more about attitude. So like cultural elements that enable us to be able to operate in an AI future, which is certainly less waterfall. It's not even really agile anymore. It's something beyond that. This iterative experimentation culture with a higher appetite for risk, whilst it needs to be managed risk, certainly in this environment, the right regulatory settings, the elements and the executive business lean into the opportunity. I think there's a little way for us to go on that one. I don't see us making the necessary progress that we need to make at that attitude level in order to fully realise the potential and create a sustainable competitive advantage as a country around this opportunity.
Can I just add, actually, I think, not to disagree, I mean, certainly on the infrastructure level, there's lots happening in data centres in the country, and AWS's announcement, but also sort of broadly, we see lots happening in that space. I think, certainly in speaking to some of the sort of frontier firms in the US over the last couple of years, maybe 2 years ago, the binding constraint, I think, from an infrastructure perspective was compute. And there's still, to some extent, that is a constraint, and you see that in the run-up in the NVIDIA share price. It's a little bit of an arms race in terms of getting hold of these chips and enough of these chips. At least the view in the US is that that binding constraint shifted to energy. And I think Australia, now it's different, we're not training these frontier models, a little bit to Alistair's point, and we probably won't. But running inference in the country, which is the running of those models on Australian soil, I think will consume a reasonable amount of energy. We need a lot more energy and electricity anyway to sort of decarbonise the machinery of the economy. But if you layer on top of that the AI demand, I think we're maybe a little bit underdone in terms of the link between energy and that, and it's in particular, very low cost and very reliable energy. And maybe just a final point on that. I think, hold on, this is about your company, not ours, Jamie. My understanding at least is AWS, they've basically purchased off-take agreement from nuclear plant in US, which is not a comment on nuclear. It's just about how important energy is. And, Microsoft have done the same with 3 Mile Island, which is not like that's a untarnished nuclear facility. I mean, that you're pretty desperate, I think, if you're sort of buying an off-take agreement and going to sort of fix up something like 3 Mile Island, and which is not a comment. It's not a comment at all on nuclear. It's just a comment on that shows the level of focus on energy supply and the sort of cost and reliability of that.
In fact, energy is part of the $20 billion investment announcement we made. So part of that's building out the infrastructure with the region expansion in Melbourne and Sydney and also Auckland, which is another $7 billion on top of the 20. But part of that 20 is actually the building out of renewable energy sources. So we've got 3 additional projects, which now takes us to 11, I think. And at full capacity, that source of energy, I think it's something like 290,000 homes will be able to power through sort of green energy. So it is I agree, it's a big constraint that needs to be solved, but there is a lot of investment going into supporting that.
Yeah.
Thank you. Moving then into regulation. So yes, we talked about critical enablers such as infrastructure, talent, for example. Where do we feel the regulation is? So again, we've seen various changes across the regulatory landscape, and we keep seeing many changes as they emerge. And obviously we saw the EU come through with the EU AI Act. Then equally, what we are seeing is probably less regulation being driven out of the US overall. Australia so far hasn't put any strong and firm guidelines out with respect to regulation. But Stuart, from a bank perspective, obviously I know that you're in regular contact with regulators. How do you give them confidence, and what is the dialogue that you're having with regulators around the use of AI in services that you're providing to customers?
I mean, I think it has to start with sort of safety and risk, but that can't come at the expense of, you can't deliver that by doing nothing. And so we need to sort of lean into the opportunity there, but to do that safely. And maybe just a perspective on the sort of global landscape, and then I'll come back to Australia, would be, I mean, obviously there's big, this is all tied up in geopolitical tensions, and you've really got 2 sort of emerging AI superpowers in the US and China, very different sort of worldviews that are almost strategic agendas that are mutually incompatible. If you put China to one side for a moment, then within sort of Western democracies, you've got very different approaches to regulation, and maybe the 2 poles there would be, on the one hand, the European Union, which has, sort of starts from a presumption that harm will occur, and therefore seeks to sort of lock down and limit the use of AI. And you have a dedicated piece of legislation in the EU AI Act that's quite restrictive, obviously well-intentioned, but quite restrictive. At the other end of the spectrum, you've got the sort of US approach, which in sort of fairly sort of normative US style is very pro competition, growth, winning an arms race, focused on sort of national security and sovereignty, and let the market sort of self-regulate and sort out the details. I think, obviously getting that balance right between the benefits and growth and the safety aspects is hugely important. I think the answer maybe lies somewhere in the middle, and that seems to be the direction that Australia and the UK would be heading. And you know, for what it's worth, I mean, my perspective on a dedicated AI Act, the good thing is that we have a broad suite of very good consumer protection and other regulation to keep the system safe, and it's very clear on the outcomes that need to be delivered, which is you've got to protect customers' privacy, you've got to have robust cyber controls, you've got to, you know, you can't discriminate, you need to not engage in anti-competitive practice, all of those sets of things, and it's fairly obvious that that's going to need to apply if those services are delivered through AI or otherwise. Where it gets tricky is sort of jurisdictional type questions, and whether, you know, clearly if a bank were offering services through an AI type agent, all of the rules would apply. That's very, very clear. Any other Australian domiciled company, same. If it's a foreign domiciled company with no operating presence in Australia and, for example, it provided financial advice that turned out to be wrong, or that agent was compromised and tricked a customer into doing something, how the regulatory perimeter would, how sort of regulation would apply there and exactly how that would get resolved is unclear. And we certainly see other examples where I think we're very good in sort of controlling outcomes and also the entities that operate in Australia. It's much harder in these sort of trans-border things, and there's a big space in there to go after.
And how does CBA navigate that? Because obviously you are operating in a number of different jurisdictions, and so there's a fragmented regulatory landscape that you're then having to work across. So with different requirements at a kind of organisational level, what approach have you taken with those different regulations?
I mean, it wouldn't be nearly as complex for us as some other companies. Yes, we operate a global business, but we don't really serve sort of retail customers outside of Australia and New Zealand. So the extent of the global operations are primarily relating to, you know, institutional clients and business clients in other markets. That said, I mean, to navigate GDPR from a privacy perspective and the equivalent, you know, the EU Act is the equivalent in AI. Maybe actually just one final point on the, you know, I talked a little bit about the safety side. The other part on the benefits, the sort of growth and opportunity, obviously we need, and it seems to be that, you know, there's encouraging signs that we're understanding the opportunity that might exist there for Australia. I think it's really critical that, you know, that benefit is captured by Australia and distributed well among Australians. And that's not a foregone conclusion. You know, if all of the sort of economic benefit and rent ends up sitting with 3 global companies, there'll be nothing left to redistribute. And again, that plays a little bit into how aspects of sort of competition regulation works, but also in terms of how it's applied. And we see some examples where you do have regulatory arbitrage that exists from outside to inside, and that applied in AI will be potentially quite problematic for the country overall.
Jamie, Alistair, would welcome your perspectives on where you think the Australian regulatory landscape, sort of, you know, the just right, the Goldilocks kind of approach. I mean, certainly it does feel, as you've rightly sort of said, EU possibly a bit too stringent. The US, again, much more kind of on the competitive landscape.
Yeah, I agree a lot with Stuart's comments. I think Australian regulators got a good long history of showing a balanced, principle-first approach to regulation. I think that same approach is necessary to support an AI-driven future. I think it's also important we take a global perspective. This can't be a sovereign kind of set of guardrails. We're competing in a global kind of market now, and particularly, you know, this AI future is only going to sort of accelerate that. So I think we need to absolutely look at how things are being approached elsewhere and kind of leverage those standards in developing our own. I also think that, you know, whilst the foundations need to be in place with things I talked about earlier, like the right guardrails and the right observability and the right kind of system architecture, no 2 use cases have the same risk profile. And I think when we think about regulation framework that helps us understand in a very common way what represents different levels of risk around certain use cases, and then applies appropriate measures based on risk. Because I think that's important to make sure that we're managing the risk, but also not slowing down the innovation. There's no reason to over-regulate or over-control a use case that doesn't actually represent significant risks, sort of a 2-way door type use case where if we get it wrong, the implications aren't large and you can certainly recover that quite quickly, versus those use cases where if you get it wrong, you've got quite big impact to a consumer or business or trust or whatever it might be, where we need to put much more rigour around that. And so I think that nuance is really important, and that needs to be built into the frameworks and the way we think about it.
I think what I'd maybe add as well is, is the importance of, and I'm not saying that this isn't happening, but at the stage we are now with AI development, the importance of proactively engaging with and working with the regulators as they come up with and develop what's going to be put in place for Australia, as opposed to watching and waiting. And we're seeing examples of exactly that. We're very fortunate to work with a number of the banks in the region, and a key part of that is being proactive on what as a use case developer, as a bank, we're seeing in the development of the tooling, where we are taking learnings from EU and US in the way that we monitor and observe and build in controls to provide facts and inform the regulators as they're going about making their decisions, making their deliberations. So it should be a collaboration, and I think that's also you mentioned observability monitoring. What is now coming off through all the proof points I mentioned is that far more industrialized way, anchored in academic research, but also practical application, to be able to monitor everything from bias to privacy to risk to hallucinations. In many cases that can be competitive advantage, right? To be able to show how you are protecting your customers and their customers' data, whether it is regulated or not. So getting that in place allows you to have that proactive dialogue with the regulator as well.
Yeah, it's a great point. Stuart, how does CBA maintain that customer trust and sound risk management to be able to demonstrate and provide those confidence around that the safeguards are in place?
I mean, all of the same standards, in the same way that the regulation would apply, all of the same sort of standards and sort of policies need to apply in terms of the outcomes that we'd look for. And so we would, similar to my view on how my perspective at least on how regulation needs to work, which is not to have a dedicated AI Act, the way we manage risk is through the standard risk management framework, which would deal with, look at how we deal with privacy risk, operational resilience, et cetera. That would be one aspect. A second, I think as you would probably know well, we've done a lot of work on sort of, with the Australian government on sort of ethical AI and the principles that might underpin over the use of AI. And then there's a lot of work at the moment in terms of sort of implementation, in terms of codifying those policies into guardrails. And so some of this is in the public domain already in terms of the use cases that we've gone live, and we've got basically modular guardrails that then we apply the same guardrails in different use cases to make sure that the model output's being checked and it stays grounded, that when there's profanity checkers and we're not providing financial advice and we're using that not just in starting point obviously was just generative AI use cases. We've got live now a number of reasonably simplistic but still agentic systems that are doing things like code reviews and suggesting code changes, even sort of how IT support works. It's not just a sort of chat experience, but actually there's agentic capability in there as well, and how we handle, we've seen a huge surge, as many banks will have, on sort of payment disputes, managing that process, and sort of we've got leveraging some of that capability. And we're also applying it now. I mean, it's very, very early, to the point Jamie made before on these sort of multi-agent systems. We do actually have a functional multi-agent system that's sort of working now, in testing now. That involves like a principal agent, sort of a manager, 4 separate task agents that do 4 separate sort of segregated jobs within that, and a QC agent that's basically doing quality control over the top of all of that. And we apply exactly the same sets of guardrails across all of those examples, from the generative AI, the agent, to the not yet live, but certainly in testing, sort of multi-agent version.
Yeah. And it'd be remiss of me not to talk about AI and talk about the huge reliance on data as part of it as well, and the fact that robust AI absolutely depends on strong data governance. The best algorithms, regardless of what they may be, will be flawed if they're working off biased, incomplete, inaccurate data, as an example. Jamie, what is your view on the data governance challenges that the banking industry is facing at the moment?
Yeah, and it's not just, by the way, it's not just about the crap data in, crap output for a model. It's also about creating competitive and sustainable differentiation in the way that you use these models. So, the models are public, everyone's got access to them. If you rely on a large language model to drive your AI use case without sort of leverage any of your own proprietary data to build on that model output, then you're missing opportunity to differentiate your service. And so I think a lot of organisations recognise that opportunity, that whole data as our new source of kind of gold nugget of value, and we've seen this incredible focus over the last couple of years to invest in modernising data assets, and particularly in this industry where we've got a lot of legacy, we've got a lot of siloed data sitting in different systems from years and years and years of adding new kind of technology and applications into our end-to-end system. That's no longer sustainable. And so everybody is looking at how do we, and taking different approaches like sort of federated data, mesh type architectures through to data marketplace type concepts, which is the approach that CBA is taking. But what is important is that you're thinking about how to bring together your different data silos or data pools into some kind of a usable format where you've got really good governance, you understand data lineage, you have trust in your data, you're able to deliver that data almost as a product as a service to the business users so that they can then build capability on that data. And like I said, both have trust in the outputs, but create opportunities to differentiate your service for the benefit of customers or users in a sustainable kind of way. So it is huge focus. We actually announced overnight a big partnership with Accenture at NatWest in the UK, which is looking to do exactly this. And like I said, every single organisation right now has a project going on to solve for this problem and get their data into a better and more usable state for this opportunity.
Yep.
I think I might, if I could, sort of build on that a little, is that, for many, many years we've been trying to solve a lot of these challenges with structured data. What actually then with generative and agentic has really highlighted is the criticality of solving the same challenges for your unstructured data and just your enterprise knowledge. And early use cases in knowledge management very quickly exposed if the knowledge, whether it's policies or complaints data or whatever unstructured data you're tapping into, if that isn't well governed and managed and versioned with the right metadata and tagging, it really compromises the ability for your systems to be able to use it. So I agree with everything you said, but almost build that the importance of applying the same data modernization, governance, etc., to unstructured is just critical. Yeah.
We're coming to the end of the session. I could talk about this all day. Thank you very much for your insights today. I think just as a closing remark for everybody, I guess what I probably would ask you is, what should banks, financial services industry, what should they be doing today to be preparing for the next wave of AI? What's your one takeaway that you would share? Stuart, do you want to start?
Actually, what immediately comes to mind is that you're looking at Anna Bly here and the comment that you're well known for around sort of, this piece on trust, and trust arrives on a tortoise and leaves on a galloping horse. I think it's extremely apt metaphor that stuck with a lot of us. I think trust is so important on all of this, and so much of that hinges from not just doing the right thing, but it's got to be really clear that there's a benefit here, and that benefit is felt at the individual customer level. It's felt at for the person who's using it as an employee, that the benefit is felt for them in terms of building skills and sort of improving their work quality and individual experience and skills, but also then that benefit translates all the way out to the country overall, and this broader point around making sure that the country captures the benefit and that those benefits are well spread and distributed across society.
Yeah, I'd revisit the comment I made earlier, which is that whilst this is a new technology, and yes, they're a set of tools, they're not a set of tools you can just hand off to technology to manage and own. As business owners, you really need to deeply invest in understanding it yourself, and that comes through using. So I know it's uncomfortable for many, but I think it's incredibly important that as business owners you understand the capabilities that exist, using your day-to-day as a way of uplifting your own knowledge and ability to understand how these can apply in your business. and the importance of just getting going. So, you know, if you don't have application technology or AI technology and software development lifecycle right now, if you're not thinking about how you can use it in your loans processes, if you're not thinking about how you can use it in fraud and scams, if you're not thinking about how you can use it in your customer engagement, whether that be voice or chat, then you're already behind. And so I think you don't need to necessarily take those big, bold steps if you don't feel comfortable doing so, but you need to be moving, you need to be doing something, you need to be understanding, experimenting, and making progress on the journey to leverage these technologies.
So, I mean, you stole what I was going to say about the importance of business driving this. But what I then look at is, I think the massive value potential is not where you're using this tooling to assist in performing a task in an existing process, because it's about looking at the process re-engineering, reimagining how you can perform, whether it's a lending task, whether it's a technology task. And so I think what's really important is, yes, the business drive, but with a reinvention angle on how can I completely transform the way that I perform a banking process that I haven't been able to improve for years. The potential of this technology can solve that, but that means looking at the process, the talent implications, the data, bringing it all together, but business drive and an end-to-end consideration.
Wonderful. Thank you for joining us, and thank you everyone for joining this session today. Appreciate it.